In a world that's been overrun by snowflakes, humanity's last hope is a group of friends with a lot to say.
Hello and welcome back to Clecs podcast. On this episode today, we have myself, Jay. I am going to be hosting, and I will go over to let somebody else speak and introduce themselves. So, Fox, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Fear the Fox, and this is my house.
Okay, and Dark Matter?
Hello, I am Dark Matter. I run my own podcast over on her YouTube. It's called Poetic Horror. It has 2 seasons. Please check it out.
And Charmed?
Hi, I'm Charmed Dragons, and I like chocolate.
Okay, so I've come up with a couple of topics this week for us to touch on. Because our first episode, we didn't have any content at all. So that was like a mess. But I've got some topics for us to talk about, so I'll go straight into it and start with number 1. I've noticed that a lot of people who don't drive in this country have been saying to me that the reason they don't drive is because it's so damn expensive in this country. Now, there are ways you can get it cheaper, but it's not always a lot cheaper. So in the USA, they offer driving as part of the school curriculum. It's like a choice you can make for GCSEs, but in the American version. Do you guys think that that would benefit UK? Why?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's the main thing. Definitely, truth is spoken when you say driving is expensive in the UK. It's ridiculously expensive in the UK. Not just the driving portion, but maintenance and all the other things you need to worry about. If it was part of the school curriculum, I think because driving is such a widespread requirement for a lot of work, it is a requirement for jobs. If you're going to teach people how to do a potential future job, part of that is getting to the job. So yeah, I do think it should be part of the curriculum.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the UK, you've got to be 17 to get a provisional license, 16 if you're disabled, but it's usually 17. In the USA, whether you're disabled or not, you can get a learner's permit at 15 years old. So you can start learning how to drive at 15 years old, which...
But how many 15-year-olds would you trust to drive a car?
That's the point I was going to go into. It's going to be even more expensive in Britain for that age group to learn how to drive, because, I mean, I'm 31 in a couple of days, and my insurance is still damn expensive, and I've only ever had one accident in my life. So, I mean...
Well, I've actually been pricing up driving lessons, and the cheapest I can find in this area is £34 a lesson or 150 for 10 lessons.
Yeah.
Which isn't that bad, actually.
Well, no, that's not bad.
And it's a proper driving school, whereas I could probably get a family member, pay him a tenner, and they could give me a driving lesson, but it wouldn't be professional.
You know, the driving from complete novice to having a full license in the UK costs between £1,500 and £2,500. So that's £2,500 on average. Whereas in the USA, the maximum amount of money it costs if you fail your test the first time is $1,000. That's like £900.
And also, the kind of person who's going to be going into driving lessons could be that they've just come through education and they've just been hit with massive student loans, repayments, and things. They already owe thousands of pounds, and then suddenly, you need to learn to drive now.
Yeah,
but don't forget, America is a hell of a lot bigger than the UK. So yes, over in America, it's required for you to drive to get to work. But we have really good public service here, transport. Sorry. You got the trains, the buses, you got taxis are ridiculously expensive over here, but over here it's more of a luxury to drive than it is a necessity, because there's so many buses and trains and everything that you don't necessarily have to drive to be able to get to work.
Problem is, businesses aren't necessarily going to employ you if you're coming in on public transport. They're going to be a bit iffy of people who on public transport, because there's always going to be that one day where, they miss the bus or it's late or there's some delay on the service and it's not their fault.
Well, that's when you make sure you get, like, for instance, my job my now and then job. If I know that there's a potential of missing the vehicle I got to get on, I will make sure I'm in work at least an hour before I'm ready to start.
What matters? Do you mind if I say this?
No, by all means, free speech, mate.
What matters? Yeah, that is one thing in America. What matters is if you can get from A to B, right, without too much hassle, and how much time is also are you willing to commute to traveling back and forth, right? Even on times when you're not supposed to be there, but they ask you to come back and come in for an emergency. I mean, a lot of businesses ask for about an hour tops.
Or even overtime. You know, it's if you're an employee who is working in a business where you may be asked to work overtime and you're on public transport, you're just going to be like, well, no, I can't work overtime because this is my bus. I gotta go, and you're not a desirable employee. Driving is almost required to be a decent candidate for a job.
When I applied for a job, I made it specifically clear that I used public transport, and I gave them the times to when the earliest I could start to the latest I could finish. And I actually had that job for 3 years. All right, occasionally I missed the bus. I made exceptions. I would walk that 11 miles back home.
However, going back to people, public transport and stuff, 19% of jobs in the UK require you to have a full license. Now, I went through these points beforehand with my partner, Gigi, who hasn't yet come on the podcast, but will be coming on the podcast at one point. She made a good point where she said that just because it requires you to have a license doesn't necessarily mean you have to have the car, because that's not part of the job agreement. So you could cut the costs by saying, well, look, I've come to this interview. I do have a full license. I don't have a car, but if you were to employ me, within the first month, I could get a car.
Or they provide a company car. Some companies will do that.
Some companies do. I mean, you've got to be earning big bucks for you to get a courtesy car, a company car. But yes, some of them do that.
Unless, of course, you're doing something stupid like applying for a driver job, like, I don't know, a pizza place or a Chinese place or something like that, where they say you need to have a driver's license and a car. But they don't always specify on the job applications that you need a car, but they say that you need a license.
Basically, if you own a car, basically, if you've got a license, right, that entitles you to drive a car, is basically the same when it comes to driving a motorcycle, as far as I can tell. So
you need a motorbike license.
The provisional license that I received, right, when it came to learning how to drive, right, was for motorbike, right, but I showed this in his right to the people who were teaching me, and they told me, right, that could also be counted as a car driving license. Now, I don't know if that is true or not.
I think as long as there is a qualified driver in the vehicle with you, you can drive on a provisional.
You can, yeah.
You can drive a Robin Reliant, or as we call them, Plastic Pig, on a provisional license. That is true, but you do have to take a CBT.
Obviously, if you're going to work, though, then, somebody else who presumably also has a job is not going to sit in the car with you to make sure that you get to work, because they might as well drive you to work at that point, since they then have to drive themselves to work.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't make a lot of sense, but, it's doable.
That's one of the reasons why I'm going to be doing my driving lessons, because at least if one of us in the house is driving, one of us can be in work and drive the person there, come back, and make sure that there's always a vehicle to get the baby to the hospital or the doctors or whatever. That's the reason why I priced up the driving lessons. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think we have about as much persuasion to tell this to the UK about how to basically decrease the amount of cars that are on the road?
Everything in the UK is bigger. Sorry, everything in America is bigger.
Certainly, if you're going to have people traveling to work all together in a carpool, it makes more sense in some of the major cities, such as London, where I think that's more commonplace, than out in the sticks, where everybody tends to like to have their own things because they've got a little bit more space to work with. But space is a massive requirement of this.
Another thing that causes, Britain to be, even though technically we have the safest roads in Europe, apparently, another thing that causes the prices to go up, of course, is the fact that in the UK you've got to employ a private driving instructor, whereas in the USA, school employs them and they are part of the teaching staff. Plus, driving tests are a lot easier in the UK. They aren't an hour long. Most of it is paperwork over in the USA. They basically just make you drive forwards, drive around an assault course in an enclosed car park, and then do a reverse maneuver. Whereas in this country, you've got to have all the insurances and everything in place at the same time. And then you've got to go for an hour's drive in the public. If you're a nervous driver, that could cause some problems.
Funny enough, you mentioned the safest roads, but today there was actually an accident on the road just up from us. A motorbike went into the back of a family saloon car.
I will say before we move on, when I was at school, cycling proficiency was one of the things that they did, and they would teach you how to ride a bike because it benefited them to have students to be able to get there without having to use public transport or their parents pulling up in cars. It was a small place and obviously limited parking, so it made sense for them to help students to get around. And this is just an extension of that. In an age where everybody needs to drive, then have some preliminary lessons at school just makes sense.
My primary school tried that, but unfortunately, because of the area, the older students used to keep nicking the bikes.
Insurance as well in Britain is also a big problem because, this statement will segue nicely into my next talking topic anyway. But in Britain, insurance for men is always more expensive than insurance for women.
No, they're taking that away, actually.
Have they?
Yes.
Well, they haven't yet.
It's being put in place in January 2020.
Okay, well, scrap that idea then. But that still segues nicely into the whole next talking topic. My next talking topic is, and to be honest with you, the first talking topic actually lasted longer than I thought, which is perfect. LGBT. We've put it off long enough without talking about it because that was going to be one of the talking topics for the first episode. LGBT, which stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. Now, I used to think that was a sandwich, to be honest with you, LGBT, but apparently that's a BLT. There we go. So if you have, in my opinion anyway, if you have a penis or a vagina, you are either a man or a woman. Don't bitch about it. You've got what you've got. If you want something different, if you're a man and you want to be called a woman, get a sex change, because until you do that, if you come up to me and you are a 200-pound man with tattoos and a big beard and a voice deeper than Vin Diesel's, you are a man. Don't have a go at me if I say, thank you, sir, or have a good day, sir, or whatever, and then turn around and bitch at me because I identify as a woman. You got a bigger cock than I've got. You're a man.
It doesn't bother me as to whether you're a man or a woman or transgender. It's more. Basically, you're still human, and all humans, right? Which makes that this is basically me talking of equality here. All humans have either a word to say, or they're just there to cause trouble. Basically, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for gender equality. At the end of the day, if you want to be a woman, go and be a woman. If you want to be a man, go and be a man. But if someone makes an innocent mistake because you still look, sound, and act like a man, but you identify, quote unquote, as a woman, don't have a go at them. They're not supposed to know what's swinging between your legs or not. If you're having the sex change, have the sex change. I've got no problems with it at all, but don't have a go at me because I got it wrong because you still look like a dude. You know what I mean?
Well, I know somebody who told, as the very first day that I was working with them, told everyone, "Don't call me a man. I'm a girl. I'm in the middle of transgending," and everyone appreciated that. Apart from one person, because he's a knob, and I'm happy to say that. But he was the type of person who doesn't think a woman should work in a man's job.
Yeah, well, people like that should be shot.
He's the one that got me punched during a shift. So yeah.
I have a close friend over in Atlanta, Georgia, right? And she associates herself as an asexual, which is basically someone who does not consider themselves to be either male or female. So it is more what it applies to them in the situation.
So is she a tomato then?
I don't know. I would say more frog, although I like to call it puck.
She's got to be one or the other. She's a human being. She's not an invertebrate. Got to be one. This is the whole point. This is what annoys me.
No, what dark matter means is that she doesn't go for what somebody looks like or their sexuality. It's how she feels around them.
But you're calling her she, so therefore she identifies as a woman.
It does feel like we're muddling gender, the biological sexing of a person. Is this biologically a male or biologically a female on a biological level with sexual preference, which is an unrelated topic really, because they're two separate things. I think the confusion is, there are people who do not conform to a gender stereotype. So when you look at them and your first impression of them, we're designed to recognize certain attributes from a distance. We can recognize things, and when we recognize it and we get it wrong, it's a question of what's the penalty for that? Because if I have long hair. If somebody walked up behind me and says, "Excuse me, miss," I would be like, I'd turn around, I'd be like, I think I'll stroke my beard and be like, yeah, okay, that's fair enough.
I was about to say, you turn around, they go, "Oh, I'm so sorry."
I'm like, do you know what? That doesn't, but it's not going to upset me. If it happened all the time, if it was something that was constantly happening, then I've got to look at. If I'm offended by it, and that's a choice, you choose to be offended. You don't, offense can never be given. Offense is always taken.
Yeah.
If somebody says something, does something, and you're just like, whatever, don't care, that doesn't matter to me. But if you do take offense and you're like, no, that does matter to me. I don't like that at all. You gotta look at things. You gotta say, well, do I have to change everyone else in the world, or do I have to change me? Is there something about the way I dress, the way I move, the way that I, present myself to others that I could do that would prevent this from happening in the future? Because if this offends me, if this actually upsets me, why does it keep happening? It's got to be something that happens more than once if it upsets you.
If it upsets you, right, that you have the right to choose whether you want to make life better for yourself or suck it up and not take into account of what other people think of it. It's pretty much in the same way as how kids being bullied in school because they talk or sound different or have a certain trait that others don't quite understand, and so try to make that look like make that look like not such a big deal. You know what I mean?
No, I think that's a really important point is, when you look at something like bullying, somebody will find some chink in your armor, something that that does affect you, and they will keep pushing those buttons because they're treating you worse. They're kind of making you subhuman. And there is an argument to be made that if you are transgender, people will treat you differently. People will treat you worse. So being identified incorrectly can result in people treating you incorrectly also. They treat you badly. And I think that if that is just a perception, then it's a nonsense. It's just a perception. You're just perceiving that people think of you worse, perhaps because of your own biases. Don't think of me as a woman because women are inferior, blah, blah, blah. That would be your own bias. Whereas if you're doing it because they literally are treating you poorly, because they think you're a woman and that you're inferior, and you're just like, why are you doing that? That's utterly wrong. I think you have a point.
Well, a perfect example. Where my old job, where I was working as kitchen porter, I ended up being called Keith for a month as a joke because some guy couldn't get his stupid car past my brother's van after I'd been picked up from work. So I got pissed off and pushed the van backwards so as he could get his car through. And because I was wearing something that didn't look like a feminine, I can't say what it is because I get in trouble. They went, oh, well, you're a strapping guy. Pushing the van is no problem. And somebody who was parked behind a bus that was behind this idiot came out, walked up to me and went, boom, hands on the boobs, and went, no, that's a woman, you fucking idiot. Then got back in his car. And the guy's like, oh, aren't you going to get offended by that? And I went, why? You got my sex wrong in the first place because you thought I was a guy. I didn't get offended. I actually thought it was funny. And then the running joke for an entire month was I was called Keith. It didn't offend me. I actually thought it was funny.
Charmed, when we're all gaming together, we still call you a man.
Yeah, but that's just you. You're a tit. But there we are.
Anyway, moving on slightly. Also, part of the LGBT is a massive part of it, like the parades that were recently in Cardiff. Equality, gender equality, which, yeah, I'm all for gender equality, but emphasis on equality, because at the moment, women do have certain rights that are more than a man. For instance, if there is a breakup in a relationship and a child is involved, 100% of the time, the mother gets the child. I don't think that's right, because there are other circumstances. Yes, a child deserves to have its mother around. And yes, a child also deserves to have its father around. But in certain circumstances, like if a mother is a drug abuser or a child abuser, why should she get that child when the father would be a better fit, and vice versa?
Well, I agree with that. Because the other thing that pisses me off about this equality thing is why, for instance, women want all of the rights to do everything a man can do, and then bitches and moans when they're actually asked to do it.
I think, again, it comes down to perception and biases.
Oh, no, I mean, like they burn their bras and then expect men to respect them down to the earth. No, I'm sorry. You gave up that right. You get treated the same as a man. You're no different.
Get back in that kitchen, woman.
And that's just this. There's actually more male chefs than there are female cooks.
So there are definitely inequalities in terms of the types of work that the genders tend to gravitate towards, but that's not because you can't. There is absolutely nothing at all stopping a woman from being a sewage worker. They just don't want to.
Or security, or police, or army.
There are some that do, and they're perfectly entitled to do that. Nobody stops them. Nobody stands up and says, you can't do that because you're a woman. Nobody does that.
Yeah, from what I've been told, and I don't know if it's 100% true, so I will do the research later, but I think the only part that a female cannot do in the Navy is a submarine due to the fact of the decompression on the hips, because a woman has got wider hips for childbirth than a man.
No,
And
that rule has actually been changed now.
it's been changed now, all right.
Yeah.
I know that it was before, because I did apply for that, and I was told I couldn't do subs because of the decompression. And that was, what, 10 years ago?
In the past, there has definitely been an argument to be made that certain jobs would be just restricted. Somebody will put their hand up and go, nope, you can't do that. It still happens in places like Japan, where if, as a woman, you can walk into a shop and they'll just be like, you can't come in here. This isn't for women. Women can't go here. And it's similar to the Americas, where, back in the let's say 50s, racism, they'd have signs up saying that, no black people are allowed in here. This is whites only. And it's more or less the same thing. You're subjugating people. You're separating them and saying, you are different from me. You can't have what I have.
Yeah.
But over the years, that's changed. As you say, women burned their bras and they stood up and they said, first wave feminism, we're not having this. There needs to be equality here. Women need to have the same access to education, access to employment, the vote. really important equal rights across the board. From a legal perspective, equally legally having the same rights. And I think that over the years, that's become very, very close. But in some ways, as Jay points out, it's kind of seesawed the other way a little bit, perhaps due to getting revenge.
But look, going along that line as well is that violence. There's a lot of women who report violence, but there's equally enough men who won't because they feel that they would be discriminated against because they stood up to a woman who was hitting them. I'm sorry, if you hit somebody, you get hit back. Whether you're a woman, a man, or a bloody mouse, if you hit somebody, they have the right to turn around and plant you a fucker back. And the other thing as well, back in the 50s, they criticised that woman. I can't remember her name, but in the 50s, it was the first female to ever fly a biplane.
Women have been responsible historically for many things. The discovery of radiation, for example. That's one I can
Marie Curie.
throw out from the top of my head. But, it's perhaps historically is the wrong way to be looking, because historically there was subjugation. It's now that matters.
The lady you're on about is a lady called Amelia Mary Earhart.
That's it. That's the lady. And look at Joan of Arc. She was dressed as a soldier, wasn't she?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, the story of Mulan is a true story. Apart from the magic dragon and all that, a female warrior did actually dress up as.
Yes.
A female did actually dress up as a warrior. That Mulan touches on a true story.
But unlike the ending of the story, she was executed and didn't return to her family.
No, she actually wasn't. Unlike the story, the commanding officer actually knew she was a woman and didn't give a crap. Because China, back then, were miles ahead of their time. They're not so much now because they've gone back to old traditions. Technologically wise, yes, they are storming ahead of us. But back then, they didn't care if you were a man or a woman. If you could fight, go fight.
It'd be foolish to turn down a soldier, an able arm, unless you were short of weapons, in which case perhaps you'd be a bit more picky about whose arm you'd put that into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in times of need, you would, men, women, and children. That's what. It's a case of importance. Speaking of importance, if a boat is going down, for example, it's women and children first because they are more important.
Again, I don't agree with that. Children first, yes, but why should women go before men? You can't have a child without both a man and a woman. So what's the difference? Because,
Charmed, back then, women were only useful for one thing, and it's just an old motto that's been passed down. Basically,
yeah, but without a semen, they can't exactly have that child. So what,
Yes, but back then also, Charmed, I think it was a case of it was the whole, stiff upper lip. It was more of a pride, more of a not so much pride. What's the word I'm looking for? A man's duty to look after his family. So his family would survive, and he sacrificed himself for honor. It was more of an honor thing.
John Bruce's mate didn't think that way, did he?
Think about the world wars. The First and Second World War were fought predominantly by men. Why? Because they were trying to protect their homes, protect their land. And their land would have been not worth protecting if it weren't for, the sacrifices of men to save the women and children at home.
They would go off and fight overseas, and the women would then be making the weaponry for them to use. So again, equality.
That's right.
They certainly did. The war went on long enough that women felt that, well, we have to do something because, we're not allowed to fight, but we are allowed to help. And so there are things that we can do. Putting women on the front lines is very bad for morale if the women are killed. Men dying on the front lines is less impactful.
So what they did instead is they made weaponry. They took over all male jobs while the males were gone, and they became military nurses to look after them when they came back.
Everybody pulled their weight. Everybody did their part, but everybody had a part to play. And that's kind of something that's forgotten, is that why did we protect our country? Why did we fight? Why did those men at the front fight? Just read their letters.
Yeah.
Read the letters of the men at the front. They fought for their women. They fought for their girlfriends, their mothers. They fought for their children. They fought for a future, and their sacrifices means that we have a future. So I think that's an important thing that's often overlooked.
Yeah.
When it comes to the things that men and the things that women do, right? That whole masculinity thing, right, could just go out the window because according to what it's supposed to mean is like masculinity, the upper, the big man, the big man, which then there is sexist.
Has a lot of negative connotations, yes.
Masculinity is basically who is the head honcho in this group. That could be either the man or the woman. So masculinity could actually connect to a woman. Anyway, moving on from that. Basically, the tasks taken by the man and by the woman in him, right, are all equal in gratification, right, to moving forward. But unfortunately, a lot of people these days are not gracious as to those tasks been undertaken and otherwise just being chucked out the window. If we had expressed more gratitude, right, towards one another and towards one another, right, for everything we have done for them, everything they have done for us, has right to make our lives a bit more easier, right? We would actually be able to express a bit more respect for both genders. You know what I mean? But unfortunately, there's always those out there who, right, just refuse point blank to associate with either gender sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you get dickheads all over the place. Oh, he's a turd burglar or she's a rug muncher. I don't care what they are. What they are is what they are. At the end of the day, I'm not dumb enough to think, oh, well, they've chosen to be gay. No. It's not a life choice. At the end of the day, it's how they're born. It's their genetics. If you're attracted to a man, you're attracted to a man. If you're attracted to a woman, you're attracted to a woman. Do not criticize people for that.
One's personality. Now that's something everybody should be looking at. It's not what's on the outside. It's what's on the inside. I mean, like for example, right? You are put you J, right, or you Charmed, right, are put into a room, right, with two separate people. They could be whoever. They could be whatever gender you're looking at, right? And one of those is downright ugly and rags, right?
Hello.
And the other one, right, is nice and clean, super hot, and looks like he could be on the front cover or something.
Hello.
He or she could be on the front cover of something. Sorry. Right?
Just me from the back then.
But yeah, basically.
No.
But looking at it now, the question is, right? Do you look at them, right, just by looks alone, or are you actually going to pluck up the courage and talk to them in him, right, and actually work out how which one is better? Because the most the most smart dressed, most good looking, and smelling nice kind of person, right, could turn out to be the most bitchiest.
Superficial.
Yeah.
Gold digger.
Basically, you know what I mean?
See, I've had people introduce themselves to me as, "Hi, I'm asexual." I'm just like, I don't fucking care. This is irrelevant to me. I don't need to know what you want to fuck. That doesn't matter to me. And the fact that you think it's so important to you tells me enough about you that I don't need to know you. I don't need to ask any questions because that's all you care about. That's all you want. I'm just like, that's weird. Why would you introduce yourself that way? Who are you? What do you do? What are you interested in? Those are the kind of important questions.
My bottom line to this right, when it comes to the LGBT or at a large BLT.
Oh no! Oh, that's
Yeah.
wrong.
Is there's no such thing as like gender equality, right? It's all down to personality. How you gonna respect those around? How you gonna respect those around you? That's how it's gonna. That's what all pretty much boil. That's what pretty much what all boils down to. When you think about it,
Someone's added quinoa to the BLT now.
The people who turn around and say vile things like, "Oh, they're lettuce licker or they're rug muncher" and all that. My answer is stop dragging your knuckles across the floor. This is the 21st century.
Why would anybody care? I've never had somebody approach me and like their line of questioning is like, so how do you like to have sex? Just I would walk away. I'd be like, no, you're a weird individual that has a disturbing interest in my sex life. I don't want to talk
I'd
to you.
have to answer in the most vile way possible just to put them off guard.
So why do people think that I'm interested in their sex life?
Like, I like to shag a dog.
I'm a furry.
Bestiality thrown in there. A furry, yeah.
I got no problem. I know people who are furries, but they don't tell me
I'm not.
like every day.
I'm furry, but only because of my hair.
I'm not actually a furry, by the way. Just to clarify.
I know people of all sorts of, once I get to know them, but it's like years later that they'll sort of confide that and the conversation will just turn to it as an act of like, let's reveal some interesting facts about ourselves. It's not something you introduce. You already know each other at that point, and you know each other well enough to trust each other with that kind of information, without, knowing that the other person isn't going to be upset by it or offended by it or just, put off by it.
You can't really talk to somebody without taking a couple of risks because you don't know what they're going to feel when you talk to them.
My butt, usually.
Sure, but I'm also not gonna, sit down to somebody. Maybe I would attend a party or something, and someone would approach me and they'd introduce themselves, and I'd be like, "Yeah, okay, so I know who you are now. I like to fuck women." That's gonna end the conversation right there. It's over. They're running away now. Nobody wants to know.
They run away from you anyway.
Nobody should care.
Talking about going to parties, Fox. I'm currently looking at our server where the chats go, and my stomach is doing loop-de-loops because I'm looking at all the gorgeous food you've posted pictures of. So thank you for that.
That's right. It's a nice barbecue.
Okay, since we're veering off topic, what's the next question, Jay?
That's a good point. Yeah. Okay, this is a bit more of a fun one. Because I want us to have a bit of a laugh, and probably by now our 2 listeners are probably sleeping. But
One of them's hurriedly typing into the comments section. I am disgusted by the topics.
Well, if you're disgusted by these topics, then why are you buying the bars?
Hey, Jay, a topic's food.
I identify as a cucumber.
I'm never listening to your podcast again.
Very good. Okay. So, inventions inspired by TV. It's a very, very, very long list. It's actually a lot longer than I thought it was
Well,
going
to
to be.
start with, the mobile was invented after the original series of William Shatner's thing, Star
Trek.
Star Trek,
Yeah, that obscure little program.
where they had the little blur thing. Mobiles came out after
Right.
that.
Just for our American listeners, what Charmed is saying, mobiles, that's what we call a cell phone.
I would love to see a real life size scanner, because apparently that could pick up on anything and know absolutely anything. So
I'd like to see a sonic screwdriver.
I'm going to do a little quiz here. I'm going to rattle out some inventions and see if you can identify which TV show or movie those inventions were actually inspired by. So, first one, artificial sight.
Artificial sight.
Yeah, that was Star Trek as well.
No.
Yeah, you had what's his name with the little visor, Geordie.
Yeah, but no. That was already inspired well before then.
Okay.
Terminator.
oh, okay.
Artificial sight is currently being pioneered and invented by a person that we all know the name of. I don't think anybody on the planet doesn't know his name, Elon Musk. He's currently inventing an artificial sight thing where they remove your eyeball and replace it with a camera which is wired to a chip on your brain, which allows you to see for blind people.
That's really fucking cool.
Who is Elon? Who? Elon Musk?
Seriously?
I don't know who he is either.
You're probably wearing his fragrances right now.
Musk.
I can guarantee you've got something in your house that has been inspired, paid for, or invented by Elon Musk.
Pretty big household name.
Okay, try me. Could you name a couple of things that I might know of?
Okay, well, the first thing that comes to mind is Tesla, his car company.
No idea.
He is also one of the massive engineers that helped invent and build the ISS.
The what?
International Space Station.
Okay.
He is currently the third richest man in the world and the most intelligent man in the world. His IQ is in the 200s.
You don't really need to know that.
And yet...
Let's move on.
And yet I never heard of him.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyway. Hoverboards.
Back to the Future.
That's got to be Back to the Future.
It is, but they have actually been invented, even though it is kind of a marketing ploy by Lexus. It's been invented, but the problem is the one and only skate park in Florida that it can be used on, they haven't told you, has a magnetic bar running under the entire skate park, because all that the hoverboard is basically magnets touching magnets, so it hovers above the floor. So it's actually not technically usable.
So it's just basically so basically all the magnets in the boards and the magnets on the skate park, right, are all basically on the same pole, so they basically repel each other, causing causing the board to float.
Yeah, that's basically all it is. I mean, it can be done without repelling, where it genuinely does float, but unless you use I can't remember the chemical composition for it, but dry ice, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So the next one is self-adjusting clothes.
That kind of feels like it might be Back to the Future as well. I remember something about that.
Yeah. Yes, they have. Well, the trainers have been invented by Nike, and they were invented to be released on the 15th of October, 2015.
Didn't Spider-Man have something like that? I mean, the modern day Spider-Man, he just put his, he just put his suit on, right, press a button, and then it just kind of shrink down to a skin tight.
Yeah. But it was invented, or it was inspired by Back to the Future.
Okay.
We've touched mobile phones, thanks to Charmed. Self-driving cars.
Back to the Future again.
No, actually, not Back to the Future.
Oh, no, it wasn't Demolition Man.
I know that Japan has had driverless cars, but they weren't very popular because people got really bored. They were like, where's the thrill of driving? There's no excitement. There's no danger. These cars just drive themselves.
Well,
the only thing I've seen, driverless cars, right? I could think of Total Recall, or I could think of iRobot.
Well,
God, I hope it's Airplane.
Dark Matter has just mentioned the one film that inspired self-driving cars, and that was, in fact, Total Recall. And again, Elon Musk, Tesla, their car is 100% self-driving. It's got cameras that face the lines on the roads and keeps itself within the road lines. It's also got cameras that look for speed limit signs. Those speed limit signs are then translated into a main hub on the brain, which makes the car stop speeding.
What happens if they're driving on a dirt track that has no lines?
You're fucked.
Yeah, that's what scares me about today's technology.
But the car was tested and driven on an American highway by a very famous British presenter who I'm not going to mention names or anything, but he's part of a trio and they're now on Amazon. And he was reading a newspaper whilst driving down the middle of an American highway in a Tesla without touching the steering wheel. It does actually drive itself. And you can summon it to you with an app on your mobile phone. So if you're parked in a parking space somewhere and you're the other side of the car park, you can actually make your car drive to you using your mobile phone.
Oh, Saints Row has come true.
Here, boy. Come here, boy. Come here, boy. What do you do when you give the car a treat?
Actually, there is a party mode on the car which causes it to do a song and dance, and it's gull wing doors open and it looks like it's flying.
To be honest, Dark, I wouldn't give it a treat. You'll burn your lips on the exhaust pipe.
Really?
Oh, God.
We've gone down the gutter fast. Anyway, touchscreen technology.
I'm thinking Star Trek. I'm thinking that they might have had it first.
Spaceballs.
It was actually 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Really?
Yes. Because
I can't remember. I guess maybe it's been a long time since I've seen that.
they basically inspired 2-in-1. It was a touchscreen tablet.
Ooh.
Not only did they inspire touchscreen, but they also inspired tablets as well. The next one is one it's a more modern movie. I mean, it's probably got to be at least a decade old by now, but it's gesture reactive UI is actually a thing now.
Matrix.
It's the film that did the stuff with the guy. He was searching for a criminal.
Boxer's
And
got
I
it.
remember him sweeping his hands around, and there was like stuff happening on a three-dimensional projected screen.
Fugitive.
Minority Report.
Yes.
Didn't watch that one.
Tom Cruise. It's an awesome film. It basically is about detecting crime before crimes are actually committed. So technically, they're arresting innocent people.
Yeah, pre-crime. Sorry. It's like, so the crime hasn't happened yet, but you thought about it. And I think that was probably inspired by 1984.
Yeah.
The whole idea of thought crime. You know, you could be criminalized for thinking about crime. Oh, I hate this thing. Well, now you're in jail for thinking about doing something about it.
So the next three are all from the same movie, which is virtual reality, Bluetooth, and media screens. Interactive media screens.
V for Vendetta.
No.
Yeah.
We're saying virtual reality.
Drones
Was it?
Drones.
and interactive media screens, and I think possibly retina scanners as well. Can't remember. It's been a very, very long time since I saw the movie.
Well,
Is it that one that they always put on at Christmas?
well, I was thinking of Tron, but no.
I was thinking Tron.
Same era.
AI.
Same era as Tron.
No.
Hell is AI.
Not quite the same era as Tron.
I'll give you a hint. The main character in it is still alive, but also the main character in it played a role in another very, very, very well-known sci-fi franchise.
That didn't help.
No, I didn't.
That's like the blind leading the blind. That is.
Oh, come on.
A sci-fi actor played another role in another sci-fi film.
Okay, he was the pilot of a very, very famous spaceship that was passed around in many a card game like candy.
Red Dwarf.
No.
Red Dwarf's not a card game.
I'm talking about the Millennium Falcon and Han Solo.
Oh, well, Harrison Ford.
Really? Harrison Ford.
Yeah. So what sci-fi? What sci-fi of like the 80s era?
It might have been earlier than the 80s. I'm talking about, of course, the one that's recently been redone with Ryan Gosling.
Wait a minute. Brain fart. Don't know. Sorry.
Blade Runner.
Oh, I didn't watch that anyway.
Ah, of course.
Never watched it.
Blade Runner is an awesome movie. It's one of the best sci-fi's ever made,
Ooh,
in my opinion.
Yeah.
sweeping statement.
Yeah, bold
Yes.
statement.
Oh,
Yeah.
come on.
Pretty good.
The Running Man is better than Blade Runner.
Oh, no, come on.
Now, come on, what? You got a guy with a chainsaw.
Yeah, it's basically Saw.
Everybody's entitled to their own opinions of what and how, what is the most what is their favorite movie of all time. That's another thing the subscribers can actually tell us.
My favourite movie of all time, a B-rate movie made in Britain, Dog Soldiers.
Right, so
Yeah.
this has dragged on a bit long. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all the ones that were inspired by Star Trek now, okay? Video calls, handheld medical diagnostics, needleless injections, translators, and Bluetooth were all invented by Star Trek.
Beam me up, Scotty.
We haven't got there yet.
No, I don't.
Wouldn't need the driving in schools if we had that.
Not behind the bus, Spotty.
That's not even Star Trek.
I don't think.
No, it was Super Ted.
I don't think, right, we've come to the point of where all our molecules, right, will be going up in big sparkly bits of dust as from a teleporter.
See, the problem being with that is you never know if you're going to get to the other side all in one piece, or whether you're going to have an eye in your arsehole, you know?
So we've come full circle.
That was touched on with Star Trek, one of the movies where the teleporter wasn't working properly. Someone tried to teleport and they were inside out when they got to the other end.
There we are. Full circle. We're back to sex changes.
So there we go. A horrific moment in The Fly, basically.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Right,
Hated that film.
I'm going to skip two of my talking topics because going on to VR and stuff, inspired, there is a movie company that we all know of. I'm not going to mention the name because they are huge. Choice-based VR movies. They are trying to make them. How hard do you think it will be? How realistic do you think it's going to be for them to make them? And when do you think it'll happen?
Well, compared to the VRs that you get these days, right, I think they've still got a long way to go. The VRs, the VRs when it comes to gaming, right, and you try and put it. They definitely need a lot of. They definitely need a lot more tweaking because, for example, right, I've tried a couple of VRs myself, right, and trying to hold a gun, right, that's a bit dodgy. It's like, where's the button on this thing? He just shoot, right? Or I'll give you an example, right? I was working over in Thorpe Park, right, as part of the Friday night attractions, and on one of my days off, I went down to Thorpe Park, right? I had tried this like ghost train ride, right?
Yeah.
And you basically in this like a London Underground car. You got the VR system on, right? You see everything. You see everything in front of you, right? You see all the graphics and graphics of all these monsters and all these flashing images. You're looking down, right? And it's like you're not even there. You got no hand. There's no hands. No nothing. One of the things I did find out, which was wrong about it, right, was I found myself right on the outside of the train.
Bet that was scary.
No, actually, I felt a bit more secure. But then again, right, all the flash images and everything. It was like watching the Blair Witch Project. It was boring as hell.
Well,
See, now going with that is I tried your one, Jay, and it's fine except for one thing. You can't see what's around you. You can only see what is in the VR screen. So if somebody comes up and touches you, you're liable to lamp a motherfucker. So you imagine if you're in a cinema and everyone starts punching everyone, you've got a fucking riot on your hands because everyone starts punching the crap out of everyone.
Charmed. I don't have a VR headset.
What was that one where you were supposed to be on a roller coaster? I put it on once.
Not me.
Oh.
You've also got to think. you've also got to think about, and how I've noticed with a couple of people, right, that with the VR systems, you leave them on hover too long, does damage to your eyes, and also can make you quite nauseous as well. So if you're trying to watch like a 3-hour video, the 3-hour film, right, on a VR system, right, you're gonna have to think about how that's going to affect the person's health as well. So that's a very strong subject there.
I mean, for something that's being rendered in real time, that's more of an issue because of frame rates. That's what's causing the sickness, is variable frame rates. If you can keep it maintained at a constant frame rate, then you're much less likely to be ill. And if it's pre-rendered footage, the difficulty, we tried this in the past with sort of multiple endings that have been recorded, and you can choose which ending you play, or you can press buttons during the film to change what happens next, and it goes to a different thing. I mean, Atmosphere, the board game,
Yeah.
very much based around that idea that you could create a movie that has multiple paths, and at various points in that movie you can interact with it. And I can see it sort of working similar to a combination of that and like an old choose your own adventure book. It's going to be something along those lines.
The Atmosphere game we played for my birthday 2 years ago went drastically wrong because we had a piece missing. So stupid you replaced the red piece with a red thumbtack. And when you're supposed to grab them at the end of the day, I slam a hand on it, turn my hand around. I didn't have any pieces bar the one sticking out the palm of my hand.
The concept at the moment of the movie is that you're not going to be able to interact with it via a remote control or anything like that. So it's not going to be like a drop list. It's literally going to be a case of you wear the VR headset and you become one of the characters in the movie. You've got free reign. You can go anywhere. You can do anything. You can make any choices. I honestly don't think it's going to be realistic because.
So I can go inside the shack and tickle his inside.
Because basically you're going to have to be able to film every possible scenario and choice that person could make.
Yeah.
I mean, we already have a form of media that is very similar to what they're trying to achieve. It's called a video game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I don't think, right. If that was the case, Jay, right, where you could choose to be like any certain character you want to be, right? Can you just imagine that working with a film like Caligula?
Yeah, it's more along the lines of it's not so much you can be whoever you want to be. You've got a list of characters that you can play in the movie. You can pick from them, but you can't be like just some randomer who just joins in. But that actor who does that part, obviously you're not going to be able to speak, so they're still going to have to do all their lines and everything, and there's going to have to be a plot. But that actor is literally going to have to be a case of, well, just in case that person walks that way, let's refilm it all over again where you walk this way, and then you walk that way, and then you walk. It's going to be a nightmare.
I mean, can you imagine trying to create a scenario where you can't actually see the camera because the actor can?
Yeah.
The actor can see the whole crew, but if you're the actor, surely there has to be some kind of restriction that you can't look up and see that there is no roof. It's just a studio.
Yeah.
You'd have a hell of a lot more work. You'd have your work cut out. It'd be very difficult. But you could do kind of a found footage style, low budget movie in that style, maybe.
Yeah. Can you just imagine? Can you just imagine playing Harrison Ford in Star Wars A New Hope when he finally gets all his dosh money, right, and he's choosing never to come back.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you just imagine how would Luke get out of that situation?
Then crash.
Well, that's it then, isn't it? You kill the franchise in one choice.
Exactly.
Star Wars, and you found out. Never mind. There he goes.
But then the good thing is we wouldn't have had all those freaking sequels that were prequels that were before and after and in the middle.
Don't get me started on that. Oh.
In which fucking order do you watch them, for fuck's sake?
You're very welcome. I have just saved the franchise from destroying itself. Basically.
I've heard the new one isn't doing so well. Haven't watched it myself. I actually haven't watched the last couple.
No, my friend said it was boring. My friend went to watch Solo and walked out halfway through because, according to them, it was as boring as it was about watching turds dry.
There's one newer than that. Actually, there might be two newer than that.
Solo I enjoyed. Rogue One, it was a little bit scraping along the ground. Anyway, we're getting off the subject here. Going back to the VR.
Yeah, basically that's pretty much everything covered. I think on the VR bit is the case of how realistic will it be. Well, we've already discussed it's going to be one hell of a task.
Yeah,
I could see it happening again. Like, look at stuff like Atmosphere. It was filmed in multiple segments. So each segment you could make a choice, and depending on the results of that choice is what happens next. And it's a very complex situation, but it's very inflexible.
but there's going to be a lot of of viewers' discretion as well, because unless they haven't figured out how to meld this in, right? And I hide with the one who is watching it that may have some sort of how they can get sick from VRs, or get terrible, like lose their eyesight because of it. If they don't take those things into consideration, then they've got a long way to go when it comes to VR, videos. So
Well, another thing that has that same type of disclaimer is the escape rooms, because you're not allowed to tell somebody else all about it because it'll destroy it for somebody else. So it's same concept.
don't worry. If we ever do have to get into an escape room VR, right, we'll make sure this one has a lot of snakes charmed.
Ha ha ha! Tit.
That is interesting, though, in that, I mean, you couldn't really spoiler a movie that is dynamic, because you could tell someone else what happens, and that might not be what happens based on their
them.
choices.
Yeah.
But then the whole medium of, like, the art form itself, the concept that you're actually trying to put across, the story you're trying to tell, if it was different depending on your choices, I mean, it's not really art. It would be like a painting that you can interact with in some way and paint it yourself. It's like, well, not the original work then. I mean, what is the original work? No one knows what the original work is.
Yeah.
Or, anything Industrial Light and Magic has gone in afterwards because George Lucas told them to change it. And everyone was like, no, you can't change that. No, put it back. It was fine as it was.
I think we've gone over an hour, Jay. I think we have. Yeah, I think we have.
That's fine. I've got one more topic. I may as well do the last topic. It doesn't matter if we go over an hour, as long as we're never under an hour.
We have editing anyway, so
yeah.
it's fine.
Flat earthers.
Oh, don't.
That's all I'm going to say.
Pardon?
Flat earthers, people who think the earth is flat because they're fucking
No.
stupid.
They don't think. There's a full belief system out there that the earth is completely flat.
There's another one that talks about a magic man in the sky.
Yeah.
Ow.
They're quite common, these belief systems.
That's just it. It's a belief. It's somebody's belief. It doesn't make it fact.
Well, these guys are convinced, right, that the earth is completely flat. The solar system, there are no cylindrical or spherical, rather, planets in the solar system. They just happen to all be facing us, and we can see the flat side. People like that shouldn't be allowed to reproduce, in my opinion. But
they've been playing Duke Nukem too much, Not everything is sprites.
No. Invent a time machine and send these people back to like 50 BC, where their beliefs will be held true.
I'm not even sure they were held true then.
No, they weren't. My answer to them is carry on walking in a straight line and see if you fall off the edge of the earth, and they'll continue walking for the rest of their lives.
Wait a minute. Here's an idea. Go back before 1492, before Columbus discovered America, right? And then put them there, because everyone believed the world was flat.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that back in ancient Greece, I want to say, one of the people in ancient Greece, and I forget which one. Someone will correct me. I'm just off the top of my head. I can't think, but there was someone who dug a hole. I think it was they dug a hole in one place and they dug a hole in another, and they could see that in the hole that the shadow fell in a certain way, and in another place they could see that it was different, like miles and miles and miles away. They could see that the hole was a bit different. And down to the measurements at different times of the day and in these two different places, they actually approximated the exact circumference of the Earth. And they weren't far off. They understood that the Earth was a ball in ancient Greece.
That's how they invented the sundial.
Now, there is modern technology that has, quote unquote, proven that the Earth is flat, right? Two scientists, and yes, they were qualified, real research scientists, took two laser pointers. Now, these laser pointers must have been highly powerful or something. They stood 42 meters apart from each other. So they made a central point.
Okay.
One went 42 meters one way, the other went 42 meters the other way. They turned and faced each other. They fired their lasers at each other. And because the lasers met in the middle, they proved that there's no horizon.
I think the Earth is significantly larger than like 80 feet or whatever it was.
43 centimeters, yeah.
43 meters.
43 meters. Okay, so it's like 86. Nothing, is it?
They've only got. They really need to ask the people working in the space and working up at the space stations above, right? The ones that control the weather and such. You know what I mean? All the astronauts up there or something like that. They should ask them what they think. Is the world flat? Is the Earth flat? Go on, take a look out your window.
Well, these people believe that Australia is a conspiracy set up by the government to make us believe that the Earth isn't flat.
Sure. I mean, when I travel to America, I go over the not over the North Pole, but I go north and then down into America.
You go see Santa
because that's the quickest way.
You go via Greenland, don't you?
Yeah, if you lay a map out flat on the table, the most direct route is put a ruler on it and just draw a line. But that's not how the world works. It's a ball.
What about day and night? Right? Granted, granted and how the sun and how it moves around orbit, and how we move around the sun's orbit, right?
They probably think the man in the sky just turns off a little light. Ping!
Likely the flat plane just rotates, and that's why the sun moves in the sky. But what the sun is probably a mystery to.
But if it's flat and it turns, people would just fall off.
I mean,
where would all the water go? Where would all the water go?
Exactly.
And why?
We'd end up with sharks on land.
Well, their argument is that if you put water on a ball, it falls off. Yes, because you're standing on the Earth, and it's pulling the water off.
If that's the case, right? Looking at all the waters of the world, right? Since Earth is mostly covered by water, right? Look at all those.
70% of the Earth is covered by water.
Yeah. Look at the. And I think about this. All those lovely turtles. What do you think they go float around and in space, making their own little worlds? Little Terry Pratchett reference there.
It's actually 71%.
Ah, I was close enough.
Somebody sneezed.
Phew.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look, my nose has gone into orbit.
I'm surprised they don't think that we're just a big ball on the back of a fucking turtle or something.
No, that's Discworld.
A big ball of gas burning billions of miles away.
Whatever gets them through the day, but they're going to have a hell of a time trying to prove that to everybody else.
I don't know why do they need to prove it to other people? Is it because they themselves do not believe it, or do they think that everybody else is wrong and that somehow this information is going to change the world in some significant way?
The latter.
It could be an act of attention.
Because it doesn't really matter. I mean, if the Earth is flat, okay, nothing changed.
No, it makes no difference, does it?
Achieved nothing, really. And it isn't flat. I mean, that's a statement rather than, it's based on what is currently held belief and knowledge, as opposed to just, what I think.
Yeah.
It's all to do with the fact that they all think it's a conspiracy, that the Earth isn't actually spherical. It's flat.
I think they should travel. It would benefit them, A, because they would sort of get a feel for what the planet actually is. and B, because they would travel, and so they could, experience something out of their lives and get something out of the world rather than just being angry and shouting at everyone on
And
it.
thick.
Yeah.
And also, they'd be going somewhere else away from me. Just so that travel is my advice. Travel.
What you want to do is stand them out in a field with an umbrella in the middle of a thunderstorm and see how long they last. It's flat. It can't possibly hit you.
Okay. Touching on that subject, I think it's time we wrap up. I hope you've all enjoyed doing this podcast today, and I hope everybody listening has enjoyed listening to the podcast. So, has anybody got something to say before we wrap up?
Yeah. Taxi!
Beam me up, Scotty.
I have nothing to add to the previous comments.
Look out for this episode and next week's episode. We are currently on all platforms such as Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and of course Patreon. We really want to start looking for our Patreon supporters, because next week, and I'm the only one who knows this at the moment until I announce it right now in front of 3 of my other hosts,
Dun, dun, dun.
next week, we are filming not only another episode, but we are filming our first bonus episode, which will only be available on Patreon to subscribers. All of our bonus episodes will only be available on Patreon to our subscribers. I've said that twice in a row now, just so as you get it. They will not be available anywhere else. So subscribe to see our bonus episodes. We've got some good plans in order, or I've got some good plans in mind for the podcasts, and I think that's pretty much it. So thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.
Nighty night.
Night.